The Jewish revolt against Heraclius was the final in a series of Samaritan and Jewish revolts. The revolt was part of the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628. Many historians view this war as marking the end of antiquity. Some historians believe the war reduced and weakened the Christian population not just in Jerusalem but across the Near East, allowing the success of the following Arab invasion. However, over the past 30 years the archaeological evidence has not supported the ancient manuscripts which record the devastation of the Christian community in Jerusalem. Background: Jews and Samaritans were persecuted frequently by the Byzantines, resulting in numerous revolts. Byzantine religious propaganda developed strong anti-Jewish elements. In several cases, Jews tried to help support the Sasanian advance. A pogrom in Antioch in 608 would lead to a Jewish revolt in 610 which was crushed. Jews also revolted in both Tyre and Acre in 610. The Jews of Tyre were massacred in reprisal. Unlike in earlier times when Jews had supported Christians in the fight against Shapur I, the Byzantines had now become viewed as oppressors. Following the Battle of Antioch in 613, Sharbaraz led his forces through Palestina Secunda and into Palestina Prima. Sharbaraz conquered Caesarea Maritima, the administrative capital of the province. When Sharbaraz had entered the Galilee, a significant Jewish revolt took place with some 20,000 Jewish rebels joined the war against the Byzantines. Depending on the chronicler, figures of either 20,000 or 26,000 are given. The territory is said to have had a substantial indigenous Jewish population at this time. James Parks estimates that if 10% of the Jewish population joined the revolt and the 20,000 figure is correct, then 200,000 Jews were living in the territory at the time. Likewise, Michael Aviona used the figure of Jewish combatants to arrive at an estimate of the total Jewish population. He gives a figure of 200,000 to 150,000 living in 43 Jewish settlements. Sallow-Whitmire-Barron questions the reliability of the number of Jewish combatants recorded in ancient texts and the population estimates based on these texts. Although he does not discount the estimate altogether, he reasons that the 43 Jewish settlements Aviona lists may indeed be supportive of a minority Jewish presence of 10 to 15%. Jews were a minority constituting 10 to 15% of the total population. Jews are thought to have been concentrated in the Galilee during this time period. The Galilee is said to have contained several cities which are thought to have been populated largely by a homogeneous Jewish demographic, Tiberias being a center of Jewish learning. In fact, the title of the Jerusalem Talmud is something of a misnomer, as it was actually compiled in Tiberias, as Jews were banned from Jerusalem. The Sasanian Persians were joined by Nehemiah ben Hushiel and Benjamin of Tiberias, who enlisted and armed Jewish soldiers from Tiberias, Nazareth and the mountain cities of Galilee, and together with a band of Arabs and additional Jews from southern parts of the country they marched on Jerusalem. The Persian army, reinforced by Jewish forces led by Nehemiah ben Hushiel and Benjamin of Tiberias, would capture Jerusalem without resistance. Capture of Jerusalem. The capture of Jerusalem was interpreted by Jewish writers in a messianic context. Sacrifices may even have been renewed on the Temple Mount. Control of the city was handed to Nehemiah ben Hushiel and Benjamin of Tiberias. Nehemiah was then appointed the ruler of Jerusalem. He began making arrangements for the building of the third temple, and sorting out genealogies to establish a new high priesthood. After only a few months, a Christian revolt occurred. Nehemiah ben Hushiel and his council of 16 righteous were killed along with many other Jews, some throwing themselves off the city walls. Christian rebellion. Following the outburst of violence in Jerusalem, the surviving Jews fled to Sharbaraz's encampment at Caesarea. Christians were able to briefly retake the city before the walls were breached by Sharbaraz's forces, who lay siege to the city. Sources vary on how long the siege lasted. Depending on the source, it lasted 19, 20 or 21 days. According to the Armenian bishop and historian Sabios, the siege resulted in a total Christian death toll of 17,000. 4,518 prisoners were massacred near Malmia Reservoir per Antiochus Strategos in reprisal for the Christian rebellion and pogrom of the Jews. Christian sources later exaggerated the extent of the massacre, claiming a death toll as high as 90,000. In addition, 35,000 or 37,000 people, including the Patriarch Zacharias, are said to have been deported to Mesopotamia. The city is said to have been burnt down. However, neither widespread burning nor destruction of churches have been found in the archaeological record. Unlike Sabios, Antiochus uses polemical language. Antiochus wrote that the Jews offered to help them escape death if they become Jews and deny Christ. The Christian captives refused. In anger, the Jews then purchased Christians to kill them. A significant number of burial sites were allocated according to Antiochus. A mass burial grave at Mamia Cave was discovered in 1989 by Israeli archaeologist Ronnie Reich, near the site where Antiochus recorded the massacre took place. The human remains were in poor condition, containing a minimum of 526 individuals. Jewish expedition to Tyre. According to Eutychius, the Jews launched an expedition against Tyre. Bands of Jews from Jerusalem, Tiberias, Galilee, Damascus, and even from Cyprus, united and undertook an incursion against Tyre, having been invited by the 4,000 Jewish inhabitants of that city to surprise and massacre the Christians on Easter night. The Jewish army is said to have consisted of 20,000 men. The expedition, however, miscarried, as the Christians of Tyre learned of the impending danger, and seized the 4,000 Tyrian Jews as hostages. The Jewish invaders destroyed the churches around Tyre, an act which the Christians avenged by killing 2,000 of their Jewish prisoners. The besiegers, to save the remaining prisoners, withdrew, having had to suffer the humiliation of watching the heads of the Jewish captives as they were thrown over the walls. Jewish control of Jerusalem. The Jews had hoped that Khosrau II would give them all of the land of Israel in exchange for their support. However, they were too few to make this a reality. For a time they are said to have enjoyed relative dominance in Jerusalem, although it may have been in a state of anarchy. By 617 CE the Persians had reversed their policy and sided with the Christians over the Jews, probably because of pressure from Mesopotamian Christians in Persia itself. Further Jewish settlers were banned from settling in or around Jerusalem, and a small synagogue on the Temple Mount was also demolished. Instead of supporting the Jews, Khosrau is said to have imposed heavy taxes on them. End of conflict. By 622 CE, the Roman Emperor Heraclius had assembled an army to retake the territory lost to the Sasanian Empire. In 628, following the deposition of Khosrau II, Kavard II made peace with Heraclius, but Kavard II would only have a brief reign. The conquered city and the cross would remain in Sasanian hands until they were returned by Shah-Baraz. Ancient manuscripts date Heraclius' entry into Jerusalem as the 21st of March 629. Modern scholars increasingly doubt this date for a number of reasons. Walter Emil Kagi puts the death of Kavard II in September 629. The Persian succession between 628 and 632 becomes confused, and different historians give different succession timelines. In the period following the death of Kavard II, up to 6 different individuals are said to have reigned. These are Ardashir III, Shah-Baraz, Borandukt, Shapuri, Shahavaraz, Azermadokt and Farukh Hormizd. Negations continued, with Shah-Baraz being the real power. Antiochus records that Heraclius made an agreement with Ardashir III, with Shah-Baraz acting as intermediary. Nicephorus gives a date of July 629 at Arabasis. Walter Emil Kagi sees this July 629 meeting as representing an earlier negotiation with Shah Beraz preceding Kavad II's death. Nicephorus exaggerating confused the record by claiming that Hormuzd succeeded Kavad II, claiming Hormuzd sent his son to Heraclius au court. Heraclius was in Constantinople in 629 where he issued a novelle that went into effect on 1 April 629. At Arabussus, Heraclius and Shah Beraz would agree on new borders. To seal the deal, Shah Beraz's son Nicetas and another of his brothers came to live in the Byzantine court, having been held for a time in central Mesopotamia practically as hostages. They arrived along with the true cross. The holy sponge was attached to the cross in a special ceremony in Constantinople on 14 September 629. The Holy Lance followed, reaching Constantinople on 28 October 629. It is probable that at this time, Nicetas converted to Christianity, as he was his father's heir apparent. This opened the prospect of the Christianization of Persia should Shah Beraz be able to maintain his power there. Heraclius would not have entered Jerusalem while the Persian troop presence persisted. Heraclius' brother Theodore had encountered resistance at Edessa, and Heraclius would not have exposed himself to similar danger. Shah Beraz had Ardashir III assassinated and took control of the Persian Empire from the 27th of April 630 to the 9th of June 630. The 630 date would also have the advantage of matching the date for the fast of Heraclius. Restoration of Byzantine rule. On the 21st of March 630, Heraclius would marched in triumph into Jerusalem with the true cross. Heraclius came as victor into the land of Israel, and the Jews of Tiberias and Nazareth, under the leadership of Benjamin of Tiberias, surrendered and asked for his protection. It is said that Benjamin even accompanied Heraclius on his voyage to Jerusalem, and Benjamin was persuaded to convert. Benjamin obtained a general pardon for himself and the Jews. He was baptized in Nablus in the house of Eustathius, an influential Christian. However, once Heraclius reached Jerusalem, he was persuaded to go back on his promise to Benjamin of Tiberias. According to Eutychius, the Christians' population and monks of Jerusalem convinced the emperor to break his word. Some modern scholars ascribe the story of the oath of Heraclius to the realm of legend, doubting that Heraclius ever made such a promise, instead ascribing this as a product of later apologists. In atonement for the violation of the emperor's oath to the Jews, the monks are said to have pledged themselves to a yearly fast, which is still observed by the Copts, called the Fast of Heraclius. Only those Jews who could flee to the mountains or Egypt are said to have been spared. In 628, Heraclius reportedly rescinded a decision made by his brother which would have exterminated the Jews of Edessa for supporting the Persians. Robert Bonfile suggests that Heraclius' change of heart in 630 cannot be separated from the Jewish question and the anti-Jewish worldview, ubiquitous to Christian thought at that time. He sees the decision as being based more on politics than religion. Heraclius is one of the few Byzantine emperors to have had an imperial conversion campaign. The rarity of such campaigns is thought to be due to Christian theological constraints. In Christian apocalyptic literature, some Jews must remain until the end of time. Christian theologians of the time also had other core theological reasons for rejecting the forced conversion of Jews. In another legend, Heraclius or astrologers are said to have revealed to him that a circumcised people would conquer his empire. Heraclius set out to forcibly convert the Jews of the Byzantine Empire, reportedly advising his friend Dagobert, king of the Franks, to do likewise. Jews were expelled from Jerusalem and were not allowed to settle within a 3-mile radius. A general massacre of the Jewish population ensued. The massacre devastated the Jewish communities of the Galilee and Jerusalem. In apocalyptic literature, the events of the Persian-Byzantine struggle in the Levant and the consequent Arab conquest inspired several apocalyptic Jewish writings of the early Middle Ages, helping to popularize the idea of a war Messiah, the Messiah ben Joseph, who would die paving the way for the Messiah ben David. Among these are the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, which is partially attributed to the events between the Persian conquest of Palestina and subsequent Muslim conquest of Syria. The Tiburtine Sibyl records that the Jews of the Byzantine Empire would be converted in 120 years, seeming to refer to these occurrences, since about 120 years elapsed from the time of the Persian War under Anastasius, in 505, to the victory of Heraclius in 628. Some scholars see similarities between these Christian works and their Jewish counterparts. Aftermath. Following the defeat of the Persian Empire, the territory would not remain in Byzantine hands for long. By 638 the Arabs would conquer Jerusalem. Caesarea would remain under Byzantine control until 640. The Arab Islamic Empire under Caliph Umar conquered the lands of Mesopotamia, the Levant, and Egypt.